Okay, Rithik, how are you doing?
Good, I'm
It's
good,
good.
Zayed. Thanks for calling me for the talk today. I think it's a great platform that you've created. Honestly, we've been following it here in India, and yeah, it's great to have you guys have someone like you know, spreading the entire growth of the sport. It's very important for the sport for sure.
No, I mean it's fantastic to have you. I think the first time you came up on my radar was with the World Padel League in India,
Correct.
and you were chatting to the CEO at the time, who was you guys had the big tournament hosted in Mumbai.
Yeah, correct. So the second season was basically hosted in Mumbai, and we did a small social media piece with them, and had the chance to speak with Scott and some of the players as well. And you know, it's still very early in India that way, but just to have such kind of level of players and host such an event, you know, in Mumbai, it was we've never seen such kind of paddle before. So, you know, it was a fantastic event for sure.
How was it received in terms of like the audience there? Because that's the one part you don't get to see from the shots I've seen on the YouTube and that type of thing.
Yeah, no, I think you know, relatively it's much lesser concerning the population. The audience was necessarily not the prime target for such an event. The kind of event was basically to kind of make the noise and to inform the kind of audience what potential paddle has. And luckily, it was like, you know, a successful event. There was a lot of people coming in, you know, from the community. Mumbai currently is the paddle capital of India, so you know, relatively we had a good kind of audience coming in as well. But you know, it's there. We have the kind of people who are hungry to see such players. They want to see what the kind of international level is right now. Everyone's practicing here, everyone's playing here daily. You know, once you play paddle, you can't stop playing, right? So you know, it's heading in the right direction. But in the long sense, I think it was more about having the impact to the community and what kind of potential paddle has.
So, just when the tournament concluded, I did have a chat with Gonzalo Rubio, who played at the tournament, and he was like, "Whoa, okay, pedal is now starting to boom in India."
Yeah, no, for sure. I think you know, in the past 1 year, we've seen over 100,000 players come up, you know, across India. Every month, you're seeing more and more clubs and centers being built across the country as well, because I think everyone's realized the kind of opportunity it has in terms of an investment. But I think the best thing which has happened globally and in India as well is that once you see your celebrities being a part of the sport, there's automatic marketing that's happening. So you know, I, I mean, there's a pro and con to it, that how passionate we are about cricket, because you know, everyone's putting their attention to cricket, right, in that sense. But luckily, hand in hand, we saw a lot of cricketers being passionate about paddle as well. And when you see someone like Mahendra Singh Dhoni, you know, play a paddle, you're bound to go try it out yourself as well. So it's been interesting, and luckily, it's heading in the right direction.
So, who are the other some of the other names that have taken up the sport?
Considering we have a bond in you know, cricket that way, you must be knowing you know, KL Rahul. He's been regularly playing as well. Dhoni's playing. Hardik Pandya has been on the court as well. Yuvraj Singh has been a passionate player as well. Otherwise, you know, Shah Rukh Khan and his son they've also, you know, taken interest in paddle as well. His son is like really really passionate about paddle. He's like, you know, regularly playing almost every day. He's playing paddle. So yeah, there's a lot of Bollywood actors and actresses, Alia Bhatt, Ranbir Kapoor, some of the higher investors and CEOs of companies. It's gone in the right perfect way in India, honestly, because it's impacted the luxury and premium market first. So these kind of influential people who potentially have millions of people following them as well. It's, you know, they've been the first few ones to be part of the sport, so it's growing in the perfect direction. It's just onwards and upwards from here.
And I think that's what you need on a local level and on an international level. You know, you need your local heroes, but we also see it like with football and with Formula One, where quite a few of the top players are starting to take up paddle and they starting to engage their audience. I think we're seeing quite a bit of the growth of paddle because of these influencers and celebrities on an international level too.
I think you know, just as an international level, like we have a massive population like following football and Formula One. We have a huge fan base over here. I mean, with our population, it's bound to be, right. But you know, when you see Charles Leclerc and George Russell, you know, playing regularly, you see footballers like one of our favorite footballers growing up was Zizou, right? I've seen him and I've like fallen in love with football through him, and he's opened his own paddle company. So it's bound to happen that that's heading in the right direction. But just so I mean I can ask you as well. What do you say? Who are the big names in South Africa coming into paddle?
So we've seen some of the rugby players. The thing is with South Africa as well is that if the players are playing on a pro level, they're not spending too much of time on the courts, obviously, because it does conflict with the sport. But we have seen players, Springbok players, rugby players, getting onto the court, and then like Steve Kitchoff, for example, he looks like a quite a regular now. Former players as well. In terms of football, we've seen Sean Bartlett. I don't know if you know of him, but there's him and Mark Fish and a couple of other guys at the football level. But we're starting to see. Across the board, there was a sort of tournament held where they brought out some of the stars and celebrities for a specific tournament sponsored by Sunbet, where they just got people on a court basically, and it's to gain the interest for the sport. So we can see that the interest is there, just as you can see it in India at the higher level, you could say the celebrity level, and that also filters down into the to the masses as well. Very recently, I'd seen now one of our previous Miss South Africas too. They've got onto a court and done a whole spread on her in one of the local magazines, which obviously will gain attention too.
No, for sure. I think it's. I've heard a lot about the growth in South Africa as well. I heard you guys are recently hosting the first FIP tournament in South Africa, correct?
Yeah, so they it just concluded. We had the first tournament that was held. In fact, the winner of the tournament was Willie Lahoz. He's a former paddle great. He's won, I think, 3 World Cups, and yeah, I mean he's 55 years old, so he's still he's not on the younger side, but because he is coaching here in South Africa with Baldwin. They got him to play in the tournament, and he still has it in him. We had a couple of guys come from Spain and Argentina too to come and participate in the tournament. But yeah, I mean, it just shows that players who have the technical and tactical levels at 55 years old can still know their way around the court and beat players who are much younger than them because of the intricacies of the game.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. But leading off to that, I think just talking in terms of the Indian market itself as well. I think something extremely crucial across the globe is that it's giving a second chance to a lot of players, which I find extremely interesting. For example, in India, a lot of the community players are former tennis players and former squash players, and potentially also like former footballers and cricketers who are looking to expand in a different sport. They find their passion in another sport as well. So I think that's a really nice way paddle has grown itself as well. It's giving a second chance in terms of a fitness outbreak to a lot of people as well.
We, in fact, have another player, Zaidi Patel, who was a PSL player. So he was a football player in the highest tier in South Africa, which is the PSL. And he's taken up paddle. He played in the FIP tournament as well. And so he's got a world ranking now. So I think like you're saying now, it's given people from different sports, tennis as well. Quite a number of players that are at the top level in South African paddle have a background in tennis. So there is, yeah. I mean, I think they quickly take to the game. They have a passion for racket sports already, and I think it's that addiction that also bites them. Perhaps what I've heard from some tennis players is that they've started from quite a young age, and they have like a sort of burnout, when you get to like 22, 23, 24. But this has given them like a second life in terms of playing at a super level of any sport, you could say, But I mean, what's the growth like in terms of the number of courts and that's opening up, and firstly the number of courts that you guys have, and also what's the traction like in terms of new courts opening?
I mean, I already know about like 10 courts opening up in the next 1 month in just one city like Mumbai. So, everyone's seeing the kind of returns that you're getting out of a sport like paddle as well, and the kind of passion that, this kind of a sport is bringing. So, you've got courts building in all of the prime cities like Bangalore, Delhi, Mumbai, in South India as well. There's a lot of growth in Gujarat as well. All of these sports, they have a huge sports community. So, it's going in the right direction. Um, I would say in the past 4 or 5 months, you've seen about more than 100 paddle courts come up across India, and that's just gonna go more and more. I think in a place like India, it's extremely populated, so a huge challenge does come in hand that we do not have. For example, in a place like Mumbai, which is the commercial hub of India, um, it's not got too much space, for example. But people who are realizing the importance of paddle, they're hunting for the space. So I'm not worried about that. The important thing for the growth of the sport is that there's going to be more facilities coming up, and yeah, I think drastically it's growing at the right level.
Yeah, so I think access is something that's important. Are you guys looking to do it through schools as well?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of restriction in terms of sports that way. There's a lot of development that happens primarily it's going to be for cricket, and then it moves on to athletics and football to some extent. So with the kind of space you already have with paddle infrastructure, it's a bit challenging in that sense. But some of the schools and some of the hotels, they kind of understand the kind of growth, paddle and the returns it can give you commercially as well. So all conversations being said and done, it's at the right direction. It might need some patience, but paddles. I have faith in the sport. Like it's for the long way to come, and I think India is ready to commit in that sense. We have a lot of one of the major sports investors in India was the Jindal family. Who own JSW Sports? They own Delhi Capitals in the IPL. They own Bangalore FC in football as well. So there's a lot of investment they do in sports, and recently and at the end of last year, they invested in paddle, and they were the first ones to really like make a huge noise of the kind of investments paddle has to come and see. And I also know that there's a lot of bigger events and upcoming support that's coming into this sport. I understand some of the major parties they're looking to build a federation as well. So all said and done, it's all heading in the right direction. It's going to require some patience, but like I said, people are growing. Like if you go and if I try and go play paddle in the next week, it's going to be very challenging for me to play. I'm not going to get it post my workouts or before workouts. It's just I have to wait a month or two to just book it in the right spot. But yeah, it's challenging, yeah, because we have a huge population, and as fast as it's growing, we need the codes to grow faster as well now. So you would say it's the right kind of problem to have.
Oh yes, no. I mean that sounds like it's a pedal mad at the moment there. But the thing is, what's quite amazing, and also what translates with even a platform like Pedal News Network is that it translates, and people have the same feelings throughout the world. When it comes to the pedal addiction or like getting into it, and sort of even the culture. I mean, maybe there's certain nuances with every city or country, but there are certain things that are universal. I mean, there's so many stories I've heard from people getting on the court, almost being forced on the court for the first time, and then all of a sudden they get off the court and they're like, okay, no, we gotta book this game again. We gotta make another booking again. And like you're saying now, initially you'll have possibly a demand outweighing the supply. And I think that's with everybody. Like we started from my city in Johannesburg as well, where there was a period where you'd have to book like a week in advance. But as courts started opening up, you start to have more options in and around certain areas. Um, a trend we're seeing here, I don't know if it's the same there, is we're starting to see more indoor courts opening up. So, that sort of mitigates the issues with weather and rain. But we're seeing that a lot of people prefer the indoor game as well. So I've been speaking to some of the owners as well, and they looking to just build indoor from here on.
Yeah. No, I think any player would honestly prefer to, because the kind of heat you're playing on in a place like India, it can be very challenging. And of course, it beats your monsoon challenges as well. Um, it's a bit restrictive in terms of infrastructure to build in indoor courts as of here in India, but I would say that's the dream scenario. So, um, I would say phase one would kind of be you're building up paddle courts and just putting up it wherever it's possible, right? That's it's about introducing the sport to people now. Phase two is going to be about like indoor courts, premium clubs. That's where you're going to be beyond a paddle center. You're going to be building a paddle club where you have for perhaps an F&B area, a place where people not just want to play paddle, but they really want to spend their time there. So that's where I think the next phase of paddle courts is going to be in India now. But surprisingly so, when I was living in South Africa in Cape Town, um, I'm not sure if you've been around in Cape Town too much, but my I used to live in Sea Point, and my gym was the Virgin Active in Greenpoint, which is a massive gym. I think a lot of people have known across it. It's very close to the stadium as well. And it was a massive sports facility, and I've had great memories there because there was like tennis over there and swimming over there. We've done all kinds of sports over there. And now my mates from Cape Town, they tell me that they're playing paddle at the gym over there. It honestly makes me so happy to see that kind of growth happening there.
Yeah, it's actually pedal mad here too. It's something that South African have taken to heart at this point. It's just it's going from strength to strength. Like you mentioned, now the FIP tournament just happened now, so we had our first you would say international FIP tournament. We've had the A1. Uh, it's taken place twice previously in South Africa. So I mean, it's something that I think people there's no end to it. I don't see an end to it in sight. I think it'll something that'll just become part of the culture. And that's perhaps something I want to ask you as well. I mean, what's the pedal culture like in India? I mean, do you also have one universal app that you guys make bookings through and that type of thing as well?
No, actually, I mean, we have a few partners that are primarily they're holding the monopoly of a booking platform in India. But there's a lot of people, putting the time and energy into getting creative with paddle as well. There's people coming up with certain technologies, that's gonna help elevate your paddle experience. So there's the right kind of developments happening in the sport. There are more academies coming up. There's some international coaches coming into the city as well, and the kind of culture that's been set over here is extremely positive comparatively. For example, something we all know, that the female participation in this sport is fantastic, but to see it in a country like India, where we've got about 35 to 40% of female population playing the sport, is absolutely incredible. I think it's so rare in a place like in India, and the kind of diversity that this kind of sport is helping in the country is fantastic. So yeah, right now in terms of culture, I think it's getting diverse, but like I said, it's kind of a premium sport right now because it's perceived as the new golf, and it's relatively expensive to play paddle compared to any other sport in India. But like we discussed, I think with time, when we see more courts growing and being developed, there's going to be a kind of a leveling of pricing across the country as well, and across cities where you have more courts to play at. But then again, a country like India, which has one of the biggest populations in the world, is going to see growth in the demand as well, which is what we want at the end of the day. So yeah, the culture, honestly, it's showing a lot of potential, and people realize the kind of fitness benefits and the mental benefits that paddle also has, honestly. So it's become a great social sport. It's a very nice community that's been built up in the city. And yeah, fun fact, by the way, we are seeing the FIP, the first FIP in Mumbai this month. We've just had one FIP in India so far, but since we're discussing FIP, we're going to be seeing the first one in Mumbai, which is the paddle capital of India.
Yeah, that must surely be exciting. I mean, also for the local players playing at the highest level in India, I think that must be something. Yeah, that's very exciting to play at that level and get some points on the board too.
I think a lot of these players who are like ex-tennis and squash players, they're seeing the value of paddle. They've started investing more money and more time into practicing the sport, and something about Indians is that we have a lot of fire in us. So, we once we take it to heart, we really put our mind and soul into it. So there's a lot of people, working hard to become a professional. They want to take it up to the next level. And I've been working very closely with some of the professional players in India so far. So I'm very excited and happy to see what they grow in terms of an international level as well. And
Is it becoming like a viable career option?
yeah. I think it's something that a lot of brands and sponsors are looking their eyes into, right? They see the kind of luxury audience that paddle holds right now, and they're seeing the kind of growth the media is putting into it, the kind of investments players and audiences are putting into it. So there's a certain fear that these players also have because we've not seen the best kind of organic support from other sports, like for example tennis, for example football. It's been very tough to break through and to make it into a career for a lot of people at our scale right over here. But right now there's the kind of window where people can really make it and break it. So hopefully in the next few years people can make a whole career out of it.
And something we're seeing here, and I've discussed this with Nico Agratelli from the US. He's a player in the US. The local tournaments here and there, I don't know if it's the same in India, but you can tell me a bit more. Is that the winnings are a lot higher than traditionally found in tennis. So I mean, I've seen the same thing in South Africa too, where players can on a weekly basis enter tournaments and win like quite decent cash prizes almost every single week.
Yeah, I think people are getting excited to compete in this sport, so it's been beneficial for everyone, for all the sponsors looking for visibility, for all the organizations, hosts who are creating these tournaments. It's been sustaining for them by side also, funding of players in terms of prize money that way. I think there's still a lot of potential to grow, and that's where comparatively, when you talk about tennis, for example, it's been restrictive, and that's potentially something that we don't want with paddle, and it's looking like it's heading in the right direction. People understand that these are something, it's an expensive sport. The money is important to fund it off in a way that they can go and travel to compete, they can go and stay in different places and train in different academies. So this is important in the growth of the entire sport globally, I would say. But hopefully people in India are going to be aware of that and make the right choices.
So how big do you think the sport can grow? 5 to 10 year timeline?
This is a more personal take, I would say. Overall, when you're looking at it, this is something we're going to cover for sure. We're going to see more players come up. We're going to see more centers and courts being built up across the country. We're going to see good levels of investments in the sport for sure, because this is something that, it's a common trend of paddle, no matter where it's growing. And we've kind of gotten the breakthrough of phase one of paddle. So it's going in the right direction. But a personal opinion of mine, I would say, in that aspect is that um, India and paddle are both working very hard to grow into the Olympics phase of projects, right? So India is aiming for the 2036 Olympics, and I really see us having the lead on that. That we might be able to land the 2036 Olympics and be hosting it. Um, Nita Ambani is one of the biggest powers in the entire association, and she's really committed to bringing it here. Side by side, we obviously have heard of the kind of potential that paddle has into joining the Olympics. I think that's going to happen even earlier than 2036. But that's what my personal view is, that it's going to go hand in hand together. And, when the right time comes, we're going to see these extremely popular leagues that's going to be created. We're going to see more people watching the sport, playing the sport. There's going to be a lot of grassroots development as well. A lot of different sports have not had the right kind of grassroots strategy when entering the sport, but then coming off to paddle, I think everyone's aware that the right direction is to grow from a very early age. So it's heading in the right direction, and I'm excited to see what's going to happen in the 5-10 years. But I think it's going to be huge. I think paddle India is going to be a huge paddle hub. And just to add to that, there's also a potential for paddle tourism to grow. For example, there's a company called Dream Set Go. They're a travel hospitality company, and they take people to travel across the world to watch sports, to watch F1, to watch cricket games, to watch FIFA. And now they've started investing and created an IP of paddle tourism. So, there's some interesting things happening in the development of sports in India right now.
And with a population like that, I mean, the sky is the limit. If people take to the sport, I mean, you could be seeing. Okay, we're not going to talk of cricket, but we could be seeing something quite special coming out of the country. And I mean, something that's interesting as well is that you manage the Indian national team in the Asia Pacific tournament.
Yeah, so I mean, just to give you a brief of that, I was working with one of the paddle organizations in India that of the time, Paddle Park, and we basically created a roster team so we could send them out to the Asia Pacific Paddle Cup. It was our first motive to basically send out a team and a couple of players at an international level, and it was an unreal experience. We got to train with the Indian Institute of Sports as well. Sorry, and yeah, but the most exciting part was it to see what potential Indian players have, right? Some of these players which were at the tournament, they've been playing at a much longer period, but India fought hard, and with the guidance and the leadership of our head coach Victor Perez. He's got 20 years of paddle experience with him, and it felt like he became Indian for that phase of the tournament. But we all was really, like, really, really, really fought for it. So it was a great tournament, and we came back with bronze at the time.
Yeah, that's something quite special. I mean, because that's one of the first tournaments, I would say, is it? And to do
Yeah,
so well, to come out with a medal,
yeah, it was the
is
first
something to be
first
proud of.
experience to play with such international players, right? But we've been working hard, and it paid off well. But yeah, that's where I say that I think these players have a lot of potential to grow as professionals in this country.
So you spoke about people watching viewership of the sport. What's that like in terms of like Premier Pedal, for instance?
So interesting enough, I think it's a bit restrictive over here. Firstly, because I don't think that no one's really gotten off and captured the broadcasting rights for Premier Padel as such, because it's still a bit too early in a space like India. But we have the right kind of people who are passionate about international sports, who are passionate about things like tennis and Olympics, who have a vast, bigger sports passion. They've been, up and updated about Premier Padel, watching these sports, and a lot of these players who are in the community, who are CEOs, who are kind of a luxury audience. They are the kinds of people who watch this kind of a tournament. But unfortunately, in a way, that our community is very restrictive in terms of sports viewership. So that's a challenge that hopefully we break in the next few years, that our audience is not stuck to just the cricket screen in our homes. So there's a lot of people who are restricted to a lot of scenes, because as huge as our fan base is, even for football, for example, there's not, comparatively to the kind of people we have in this country, it's not as big. People watching football, for example. So there's a huge barrier to break over that. But the growing community who's playing paddle right now, they are, up to date about paddle, and they're loving it. We want to see such players come into India potentially for an event soon, and I believe it's gonna happen soon. Like the World Paddle League saw someone like Rubio and Bea come into Mumbai, so it's not too far.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think this is a global thing, not just in India as well. That 90% of people that are playing pedal, perhaps only sorry, from I would say, like, if you look at the total pie, right? So of the 100% people that are playing pedal, 90% view content in terms of improving their game and that sort of a thing. Whereas maybe 10% look at pedal, watch Premier Pedal, and engage at the highest levels of the game. So it's unlike other sports, like you could say, like cricket or football or whatever, where the majority are watching the sport, and perhaps some people aren't even playing the sport. You get like maybe 60-70% watching football and maybe 30% playing it. So I think that's a global trend, but that also needs to change at some point, because once that happens, that will unlock some massive potential in terms of career for the players. Well, once the TV rights and that sort of thing comes through um, for the big broadcasters.
For sure. I mean, no, I'm not sure with how it is with South Africa, but relatively with other sports, we might not be that. It's still a bit too early in terms of global viewership or this pan India viewership as such. But when you're looking at these tournaments happen, these international tournaments taking place in, for example, a city like Mumbai, you have a lot of people coming up and surrounding the court at least to show up and support and watch these games because the kind of professionals who have up and come in this game, um, they've really they're creating an excitement on that court. So compared to any other sport, it's surprising that at such an early stage you have a lot of people coming and watching live games at the centers and tournaments. So it's got a lot of potential for sure, but I think that's something that's true. It's a global challenge, something for sure.
So, do you feel like the top local players are having a sort of, local fame that they perhaps never had in tennis, for instance?
100%, 100%. Because like I said, there's a lot of people, important people playing this game. There's a lot of actors, influencers. There's a lot of cricketers playing this game, and they want to play with these professional guys because they want to challenge themselves and play amongst the best of the best. So there's definitely kind of a extra buzz they're getting through paddle for sure, and they deserve it because the kind of hard work that they're putting in. I think it's rightly so that they're popular in this country right now.
Another, just to change gears a bit, another interesting thing that you're doing is you're connecting pedal courts and brands through a consultancy that you started. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about that. Ace.
Yeah, Ace Paddle is it. Ace Paddle is basically it's about the entire ecosystem of paddle, right? I That's where I made my decision because I knew I wanted to completely give my life into paddle. Ace Paddle is helping support and the growth of the entire ecosystem of it. It might be teaching players and helping people understand and educate about themselves the sport or train them to become professionals. It might be selling equipment or rackets as well. It might be helping people build courts, or it might just be even doing brand integration into the sport of paddle. But the point of Ace Paddle was to specifically focus on the niche of paddle where and yeah, I came across paddle for my first time in France. I was living there and doing my sports management over there not too long ago, and yeah, I fell in love with it. I saw anyone can play, no matter your size, your age, your height. It didn't matter. You can step on the court, and it's easy for anyone to pick up once you can anticipate the pace of the game, right? And I just saw the kind of potential it has and the kind of noise it was making globally. And yeah, it just kind of felt like a dream that I have to kind of lead this way and help develop it in my country. And I'm very blessed to have a pretty successful past few years in paddle in India.
When did you first play pedal?
I first played paddle about 2.5, 3 years ago. That was when I was in France at the time. But yeah, it was something that I was looking forward to a long time for sure. And it's a very peaceful thing knowing that the kind of growth is happening in this country, right? So I mean, globally as well, you have the same challenge that it's tough to book your code at the right time as well, but that's always going to be there. And what about you, if I may ask, and divert a bit? What was your start and journey point into entering paddle?
So there's a court that's close to where I'm staying. Um, I think it was 2022, around maybe June or so, where I started noticing it, and then I started to try and get people to come and join me to play. I couldn't get enough players, but then eventually, like a month or two later, I got enough players to come play. Look, I seen this place. I didn't know what to expect from it. I put together 8 players, the first time I ever played. And then we did a sort of, I didn't even know what an Americano was, but we did a sort of Americano thing just in our first game where we rotated because, I mean, people were still learning the thing and it wasn't yet booming in South Africa. But very soon after I started playing, then you started to see the traction. A few weeks later, there were like four of the courts were three of the courts were full. The fourth court started getting full. So after my first game of playing, we set out on the side of the court, and we we said, you know what, we have to be back. Let's see if we can book the following week. So we didn't yet have the issues of where the demand was outstripping the supply at that point in time. But everyone who came off the court was like, okay, we have to play this game and again, And I think everyone who played that day still plays till today. So that is the first entry point into the game. Subsequently, there's probably about, I would say, 15 clubs, not courts, 15 clubs that's within 10 or 15 minutes from where I am. So it's an incredible amount of courts. South Africa's now hit just over 1,000 courts. So the growth is pretty incredible. Like I said, a lot of courts are now moving into the indoor. So what we're seeing now in terms of trends, and you might see this at some point there too, is that people, because when you book a game, you want almost a guaranteed game. You don't want it to be disturbed by weather or anything like that. And because in South Africa, sometimes weather can be, a little bit unpredictable, we starting to see that the indoors are now getting full. Whoever's put out indoor covered courts will get booked out first, and then the overflow will basically go to the outdoor courts. So I think certain areas are starting to hit like a saturation point, but perhaps like the outlying areas, there's still potential for that too.
Okay. And I was gonna ask you when we were discussing about the Premier Panel, what are your thoughts about the top players in the country, in the world right now? If you have a favorite pair or a player.
So when I just started watching Premier Padel, Galan and LeBron were the two main guys. So of course I wanted to choose someone that was a little bit of an underdog at the time. So I went for Cuello and Tapia, to try and overthrow them. And that happened very quickly actually, because they were always fighting for the titles, but they were losing. But then eventually they are now the big dogs, right? So I might need to find another favorite. But yeah, I mean, I think Arturo Coelho is one of my favorites, Tapia as well. So that combination is absolutely brutal. They are. Yes, it's just like levels. It's in all sports you get the dominance level, and I think the dominance level in the world of paddle. There are other players, of course, I love, and we're having a couple of them that will be in South Africa in August. So Galani is one of the guys that will be coming through. Guys like Momo Gonzalez, very good player. Yanguas, he'll also be coming through. So there's quite a number of players I like. I just enjoy watching overall. Obviously, we do have those standout players as we discussed. I'm starting to now watch a little bit of the women's side. Get a bit more into it. I can't say I watch every single match. It's a little bit, it's a bit much, but I am starting to, enjoy their game as well, because what I've been told by many coaches is that if you're playing on a, like a recreational level, you actually will learn more from the women's side, because they have more of a tactical, slower game, which resembles, I guess, the type of game you play at the recreational level. And what about yourself? Yeah.
100%. I think, just to add off to this, I would say my coach was always telling me this, that, more than your power smashes in your men's doubles, you're going to see much more technique and finesse in a women's game, because they're kind of playing that kind of a chess game that paddle's supposed to be. That they're going to be patient, wait for the right time to go for the finish, and that's it. And it kind of turns out to be true. You'll see a lot of smashing in the men's one for sure, comparatively.
Exactly. And your top players that you follow?
Uh, I think it's the same kind of synergy with you as well, because when I started following it, I saw LeBron and Galan at the prime, right? But then I think at that time I saw Coelho at this young early stage entering the sport and just kind of dominating from the start. It was kind of hard not to love him, and the kind of creativity that Tapia also has. and it might be a challenging shot to him, but he'll find a solution to that. That kind of a player just finds my heart to him. So I think I can't really pinpoint it on one because I have a lot of appreciation for every single player, one of them. But I would definitely be siding with Tapia at some level.
And the thing with Tapia and Koyo is that I think I heard Bella say the same thing when I was watching it. I thought, okay, if Galan were to play with Koyo, do you think they'd win? And I probably thought in my head, yep, they probably would. It's having that huge 1 meter 90 left-handed player who's such an amazing all-round player. I mean, if you're thinking of like FIFA, like I would say Koyo stats are like 90, 90, 90 across the board, right? Nothing, you wouldn't say that one thing perhaps stands out completely, but across the board, he's like stacked up.
I know. I
And
mean, I think that's where like their dominance is proven, right? So I think no one's able to beat them in the finals, and it's showing because of a reason that they're so completely well-rounded as players, both of them. Yeah.
yeah, so it'll be interesting for us to see because we have a couple of them coming through to South Africa. At the moment, I believe there's 10 signed up. Um, and it's going to be hosted at the Wanderers Cricket Stadium in Johannesburg. So so that is something really that South African fans are now really looking forward to. But to see these type of players up close, and I think that also like inspire like a generation of young kids that in previous generations they might watch cricket and football and other sports. If they see their heroes coming now, some of the best players in the world, you might start to see young kids of like 9 and 10 saying, you know what, I want to be like Galan, you know. And I think that's probably the advantage that some countries like Argentina and Spain have compared to, like, say, South Africa and India when you're talking on a world level, is that we're so new into the sport. So the heroes, are only starting to emerge for South Africans. Whereas, the Spanish players can talk of, players like, that they've seen ages ago, like Willie Lahoz as an example. Argentinian players can say like Seba Neroni, or Bella. And we're only seeing like the tail end of those guys' careers.
No, for sure. I think that's something very important and similar to what you said with South Africa, hand in hand with India, is that when we see such kind of players, for example, in the WPL, we saw someone like John Sands, we saw Momo, we saw Sanyo as well. And seeing such players, you get kind of a wake up call that, oh my God, we have a long way to go. So I think it's important for our kind of players, the professionals in our countries, to see them play in reality and kind of understand what the level is at exactly. Recently, we had the Asia Pacific Paddle Tour come up in Mumbai, and we saw Paul and Edu. They're the number one pair in Asia playing the Asia Pacific Paddle Tour series, and there was no way to even beat them. It was such an experience to just see them play against us, but yeah, it was a bit heartbreaking, but it's a wake up call that we have a lot to learn from these kind of players. They've been practicing for 15 years, for example, and it's gonna take some time. But I think we both, as countries in South Africa and in India, we have a lot of potential in athletes. So looking forward to it.
Yeah, look, I mean, on a global level as well, I think the two countries that people outside, on a global level are so keen and interested in knowing about is, in terms of the growth of the game, is India and the United States. It's just people just feel like those two countries with the populations and the fanaticism of sport will just unlock so many opportunities across the globe, if the two countries can, get into this game in terms of fan viewership, becoming, you understand, eventually the players will become big stars, right? When I sit and talk to certain, people who are in the know and hanging around with the players at the moment in certain levels, at this point in time, the players do get recognized at certain when they're around certain events and stadiums and things like that. But you could go to Paris, for instance, and you could see Galan walking around, uh, and no one's going to bother him because they don't have that celebrity status as yet in some fashion. But I think it's probably about 2 years away from that. As you get viewership into Premier Padel, as more people start to to watch the game and want to know more about what's happening at the highest level of the sport, um, then I think it's going to unlock things like the opportunities that you know the
For sure.
type of thing that we're seeing with Arturo Coyo in Miami, for instance.
Yeah, yeah, no, for sure. I think interesting enough, it's important for partners and sponsors to basically be getting creative for the growth of not only their brands but the sport entirely as well. For example, I'm extremely interested to see what kind of further growth can the Middle Eastern companies and organizations and, for example, Red Bull, what they might do in the space of paddle as well, because they're very selective with the kind of sports that they integrate with, but now that they are a part of it, I think they never go wrong with what the kind of creativity they do with their marketing and communications. But I think that's going to be detrimental to spread the word of the game globally.
Are there any innovations that's happening around India? We spoke about the booking app. The one most South Africans use, most South African clubs use, is Playtomic, for instance. That's been a phenomenal success on a global level, right? But are there any other innovations, or even booking innovations, or line technology, or any technologies that are and innovations that are new into the game that are quite exciting, or perhaps even not quite yet there that you feel should be?
Yeah, for sure. I think the it's still relatively early for kind of technology to come in. As in the aspect of Playtomic, the Indian market, when it was growing in the most early stage of paddle, it grew hand in hand with pickleball. And one of the best apps over here to be booking platforms is Huddle, and Huddle really took the lead and supported the growth of paddle itself as well, which kind of worked out very well for them because now they have a very big dominance in the kind of booking platform system they have. And Playtomic, as well as the concept works globally, it's kind of not had the same impact in India because we've got other convenient platforms to book it on, for example. So as per in that kind of sense, there's a lot of other people who still want to create and expand in that kind of space, but it's still relatively early. I personally have had conversations with a lot of people who are looking to put some energy and time into developing a racket in India. They want to basically come up with the line technology at the glass as well. And there's people looking to expand in the technology side of India. It's honestly a huge hub for technology and creativity, especially in Mumbai, for example. So it's not that far out, but the basic need of all the clubs and centers is to create a more sustainable model in the sense of pay and play and your events, and that's where all the mind and focus is on right now, which I think is primarily the right direction it should be at right now. It needs to organically grow first. That's where you can see the later things come up. But I with that being said, it's not too far at all. I think some of the premium clubs that have already been established for a while, they've got some brand value. These guys are going to be taking the next stage of making them a bit unique. So I'm looking forward to seeing it in India. Has South Africa seen that kind of a technology?
Yes, I think most of the technologies that are put into clubs are from foreign innovations. So including Playtomic, for instance. So that's the dominant booking app in South Africa, and we have a line technology app that's put into one of the clubs, Red Point Technology. That's they're looking also to do things at a global level too. Um, and we do have like camera systems that are put into to certain clubs where people can watch like replays of the last 30 seconds or whatever it is, so that they could share that. That seems to be quite a thing in South Africa, actually. Quite a few, I would say, 20 or 30% of the clubs have that, have a technology where you can save your shot, basically. Because in almost every pedal game, you're gonna have one or two moments which is you want recorded. So I think that seems to be quite a nice technology that's put in. I haven't heard of too many other technologies that are coming in, but on the playing side. But there are also other technologies that on the admin side, in terms of almost automating your racket rentals and your balls without having the staff. So having like a vending machine and that sort of a thing that seems to be coming into certain courts too. Um, so I mean, the thing is, whatever has been set, can become a standard, which is so interesting for like innovators. Because if you look at, I saw an interview with Pablo Curo, who's the head of Playtomic. He was saying they didn't, they were not like great innovators. It was just an obvious thing that they put together. In the clubs that they were frequenting at the time, there was no booking app that was there was no booking app. You had to call in. So it's pretty simple. If you're booking your movies on an app, why not book your pedal games on an app? And then all of a sudden, that company becomes like the standard of bookings throughout South Africa and Europe, right? Um, so it's interesting that you do get these sort of innovations, and there might be one or two innovations that we're not thinking of right now that becomes so obvious, a year or two down the line, and that almost becomes like the standard of the game because the game is so new. I think people are. Open to new ideas. It's not like the lawn, like the tennis federations that are, existing for like 100 years.
For sure, for sure. I think it's very interesting. I'm sure it must be very interesting to take someone like the creator of Playtomic's perspective into what kind of innovation that he came up with. But yeah, I think even with India, it's so convenient to do anything. Even if you want to book a movie ticket or concert ticket, you want to order some medicines or some food, it might be at whatever time, or it might be booking a sports platform. I think this kind of creativity is it's very important for any sport.
So, what can we look for, as out like people from a global perspective? What can we expect from India, um, on the international level in terms of playing? What can we look forward to from that perspective?
I think one thing is really going to be promoted in the next few years. It's going to be paddle tourism. India, of course, it's a tourist hub globally, but in that sense, we're seeing paddle courts being put around everywhere. And if someone's coming to visit India and they find out about paddle, they get extremely excited. Just the other day, I met Reese Topley, and he's telling me that I'm trying to get a paddle game in, and I'm not able to find a court. But anyone who's like where no matter where you're from and where you're going, if you have kind of a passion in sports, you're finding your way to paddle. So it's kind of going hand in hand in the growth of the paddle tour in the sports tourism sector. So I think in vice versa scenarios as well, if of people going outside and traveling for paddle, that's something that it's going to be growing in the next few years for sure. Secondly, and very importantly, is that there's going to be some big investments and some bigger tournaments created. Something that, in the long sense of Indian sports, that's really worked well is the kind of unique IPs that can be created. So I believe that there's going to be a good amount of events coming up in India, especially some popular leagues and some unique leagues. The kind of concept that IPL created, it really created history in terms of Indian sports. So no matter which sport you go to, it might be football, it might be kabaddi, it might be rugby. In fact, is also starting a league soon in India. So you're definitely going to be seeing a paddle league soon enough as well. But yeah, and last of all, I think the biggest aspect would be the players up and coming in India. I really do believe that this is the first time that we are not too late in terms of growing a sport and entering the sport. Um, a lot of other sports have been developed globally much before than we've gotten the chance to. But this is something that, for example, comparatively in all the other countries in Asia, we are growing hand in hand. I think even with South Africa, we're not that too far apart where paddle came into our country. So it's for once that we're not too late, and we're gonna work hard and compete and put a mark on the global map of paddle.
Yeah, I mean, we put out a post as well earlier today, you know, asking people which other countries would they like to see at the top of the Premier Pedal. other flags besides the Argentinian flag and the Spanish flag. And we had quite a number of people saying India too. So, we do hope that very soon we start to see other countries represented at the highest levels of the game. It will happen. It's just the opportunities will present itself, and people will have the time to learn the tactical side of the game, and then we'll start to see countries like South Africa and India and Italy and other countries that start to creep into the highest levels. But it's been a fantastic time talking to you, and also, I mean, we look to have you back again in the future because as things develop in India, we also would love to know what's the latest going on there and what's the latest buzz about. So I think we'll chat to you again about that when things do happen.
Guys, thanks so much for having me. And I think what you're doing is so important in the global aspect of thing. You're connecting everyone across the world who's into paddle. I think it's fantastic. I keep watching the content you keep on posting and talking to people. So it's been an absolute honor. Thank you for having me today. And yeah, I would love to chat up with you at a future date.
Thanks so much, Ritik. Appreciate that.
One of the times you come to India, maybe we'll play paddle over here, or me come
Oh
over to you.
yes. Oh yes, definitely. Yeah, I'm always up for that. I think you're gonna see a lot more people planning their trips around where pedal courts are, right? So you book your hotel or whatever that's somewhere that's not too far from pedal courts.
Yeah, no, it's been a minute since I came to South Africa. I think I got to make a trip, but hopefully soon enough.
Thanks so much.